Hi, and welcome back to Still the Show, our vodcast on all things pétanque. And guess what? We've got a special guest with us tonight, Gareth. It's the coach himself, Le Coach, Vince Wills, from the Women's World Championships, which have taken place over in France in Douai. And I thought we'd just start off, Vince, by saying to you, what were your impressions of that tournament? How did you feel it? Was there anything that surprised you, or was it pretty much as you were expecting?
Yeah, my only other experience of that kind of event was the World Championships for the men's in Dijon in December. I was a little bit disappointed with the turnout from the local crowd. That was one thing that I thought, home territory for the people that run the sport basically in France. I was expecting a lot more people. So that's something that did throw me off a little bit, but it was organised. Games started on time. There was no changes of format or anything. We've seen that happen in past championships. So yeah, no, it was really good, really nice experience, really cool atmosphere. And I think the relationship between the nations is something that contrasted a lot versus the men's. I felt there was a lot more togetherness in the women's game in between each nation. Yep. Versus the men's, there's a bit more testosterone and we're going to beat you, Yeah, that's one thing I did notice.
Your family's from down south near Dijon. Do you think there's maybe a more culture of pétanque down south, and that's affected the numbers turning up to watch?
Burgundy is a big pétanque region. It's got some of the top players have been from around there, like Fournier. Every town generally lives and breathes pétanque over there, but it's hard to say. To be honest, I don't know. I don't know if the numbers vary by region to that extent. I think it was just perhaps the advertisement that maybe they tried to lower the hype a bit to take the pressure off the French team. I don't know. But yeah, there was definitely a big difference. And Dijon was basically a full house when France were playing.
I heard from other people about the lack of crowds. And the person I was speaking to said they thought it might be because it was the women's game rather than the men's game. And the real sort of superstars and the pin-up people of pétanque in France do tend to be the men. What do you guys think?
So that did cross my mind, and that's what I was umming and ahhing about earlier. So I was toying with that thought, but then from the televised perspective, when it's on television in France, the women and men's game gets pretty even distribution from what I've seen. In the Marseillaise, not the case, probably the biggest event in France, but the PPFs, the Masters, and things like that. I mean, certainly the PPFs get a lot of the women's games televised. The Masters is very male orientated, to be fair, in terms of what you see first on television. But yeah, that might have played a part. That's a question in so many sports, isn't it? So.
Yeah.
I think the one thing they did do quite well. They did get a lot of young people, school kids involved. They've clearly organised that beforehand to bring them in, and I thought it was really nice when the young girls were turning up and getting autographs off our team, and that sort of atmosphere I thought was really nice. I've not really experienced that before, an international pétanque tournament before, so that was pretty good. I think the only other thing I would say about experiencing that, I call the Cathedral of Pétanque, because it's just like an amazing. I mean, it's bigger than an Amazon warehouse, isn't it? I don't know.
Pretty big.
What you compare it with. I mean, it almost feels like it's too big. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, they only cut half of it off for like rest areas and stuff because it's that big. I mean, it is massive. It's quite impressive, and they're good. They're good terrains as well. They're not easy. They're not extremely difficult, but they're a nice balance that require good play, basically.
There's absolutely no criticism of the pitches, for sure. The pitches are really good. Yeah.
What are the off-game facilities like, if you know what I mean? I know you mentioned rest areas, but is there areas to sort of like chill in? Is there food? Is there, just tell our viewers what it's like there?
Yes. Good toilet facilities. They're kind of bang in the middle of the place. But I mean, in terms of chilling, there is a bar there, but they had locked it off for the French for the whole tournament. It was VIP access only, which meant France. So in Dijon, you had the VIP area was all players, all coaches, and you had your real area where you could just sit on a sofa and have a nap if you wanted to in between games. With this one, they nurtured it very much for the French, and rightly so, home advantage. They do what they want to do, but they put up some curtains for the other nations, some chairs and tables, so they had an area as well to to relax, and they provided beverages and all that stuff. And then outside there was one food van pretty much, and then there was the food provided by the federation, which we might want to go on to later, but that was that was shocking, really. I mean, that's twice I've been to France for World Championships, and Dijon is the food capital of the world, and I was shocked at the place they chose to feed everyone. And then this place, I mean, it was like mushy, freezing cold risotto with peas. Like, the risotto was just wet rice, basically. It was weird. I just remember looking around at the Italians. You got you got the Italian squad there, like just like so disappointed.
Even if people are disappointed with the food, it must be pretty shocking.
Yeah.
Well, Vince, we found a really nice van, didn't we, near the hotel where we were on the see
what
the
did
ladies
you call her,
there.
Madame?
Madame Fritte. She was there, and I mean, that's the biggest amount of frites. What was it? A tuna roll I had. I think I've never seen anything so big in my life for about €7. It was not great for the waistline, but quite a nice and welcome thing after that food that was on offer in there. Sure. Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to the tournament itself. Let's just first of all just remind ourselves who is in this team. So there we are. There you are. You always look very serious in photographs, Vince. I've got to say that. I don't know why. Is it? Anyway, that's the lineup that was in one of the Swiss rounds against the French team. And what do you want to say about the individual players in our team, Vince? What, I don't want to go into anything too personal, but for people that don't know our players, right? What would you say about them individually? Let's start with Ella.
So Ella, I'd had the pleasure of playing with Ella and against Ella, in sort of recent years, and I've watched her grow since she was about 12 years old, if not younger, when she first started playing. And the thing that she's been through so many stages in her pétanque career of being, very young and talented, probably 10 years old when she first came to the piece, to then starting to win a couple of championships very young. I'm guessing she was probably about 14 at the time or something like that, maybe even younger. And then went through a phase where she didn't win as much in England. And she said this to me, she said that, she got into a phase where she was getting really upset and beating herself up about it and everything. And after all that has come this extremely confident, but doesn't come across cocky or anything. She knows what she can do. And I think she surprised me in a sense, because wherever she was asked to play, so I initially brought her in at first point, and she didn't see that in a negative way. And a lot of younger players can see that. Everyone wants to shoot and be the attacking player. We saw something in the first game that we wanted to tweak. She came in and played at first point, and I've watched that game back. She nailed virtually every ball in that game that she came on and played her first match at an adult women's championship. And from then, she just kicked on. I don't think she left the piste after that. I think she stayed on virtually the whole tournament, moved up into middle a bit later on, and I don't recall many misses. She put a lot of important points. She turned a lot of ends and dealt with a lot of pressure shots. And it was just a pleasure to watch her, really. I was confident in her, but I was still like, wow, like, you nailed this opportunity. And gave me a headache from game 2, basically, who to start every game, because all 4 of the women were brilliant and consistent, and there was a real togetherness. But it gave me the right problem. That's what a coach wants. You want to think, Christ, how am I going to choose my team? They're all playing brilliantly. So yeah, Ella was fantastic.
Yeah, and then just moving along, Becky Edwins. What would you say about Bex?
So the biggest thing that I got with Bex straight away, and it was even when we were traveling there, is I didn't realize how organized she is, and that she's got this real sort of motherly, like, no, we're not breaking rules sort of attitude. Yeah. And first of all, I love that. And I think it makes her, without being necessarily the biggest character in the team, it made her like the motherly sort of leader in the squad, and she is the key to the camaraderie that we saw between the four women. And then from a playing perspective, we started off against Japan, and I think she had a couple of shaky ends to start the tournament. And then after that, whenever she was on the piece, she demonstrated a lot of consistency. She's not afraid to try a more audacious shot that perhaps a lot of the other women in the country are not comfortable playing. And that gave us another weapon in the armory, when we were thinking about how we're going to beat teams, is having that element that, and to be honest, it's not just in England, it's in the women's game generally. You don't see much, high lobbing and lifting the ball. It's not the perfect terrain to necessarily do it on all the time, but Becky brought a real togetherness, and she was a real key in the squad as well.
Yeah, and Alex, of course, was brought in from the team that was the runner-up, because in our SSEs this year, the women entered. I can't recall anybody entering as a 4, although I think you were allowed to. I think most teams entered as a 3. And Alex was obviously selected to come in. What's your thoughts on Alex?
Well, it was the right selection. She was the quite literally the carrier in the team on the way to the tournament. She was always helping out everyone, and she slotted into the chemistry of the other 3 really well. Obviously, there's 2 from Meadow, 2 from Baldock, 2 rival clubs. You didn't sense that at all. I think Alex is a big character. And I think this team needed that. I think this team needed a bit of oomph with them, someone who's going to speak out and speak up, and that was really key. She started off playing in the middle at the start of the tournament and held that position for virtually the whole thing. Hit a lot of important shots again. But it was the thing that impressed me most was at the start of each game, or at whether who was playing or not any point did I get a sense of I should be on the piste, I'm playing well. Yeah. It was very much like, let's get this right and let's beat this opposition. And that I didn't really know that about Alex. I've always known she's a brilliant woman. I've always got along with her since she was a junior. But yeah, she was just such another key part of the puzzle in this squad, and it was a pleasure spending the week with her.
One of the things I noticed, obviously watching closely all the way through, was I can't remember what game it was, but she suddenly wasn't feeling 100%.
Yeah, her knee was hurting.
That's right, and she was immediately saying, look, I don't feel quite right to take this on. Just need you to be aware of that. Again, sometimes you don't get people being honest about that, do they? Because they're so keen to be playing,
Yeah, that's where I would say 80% of people would try and just play through it, be like, I need to be on that piste. And again, Alex was looking at the bigger picture. It saved me as well, because I didn't have a clue who to start that game, because I was thinking this is virtually the game that decides whether we go to the main or the Nations Cup against Estonia.
Yeah.
And when Alex came over and said, no, my leg's not feeling 100%, let's change it up, that led to a really strong performance from the other 3, and the headache continued. And we really did nail the teams that I feel we should be beating, that often you get close games with. We destroyed virtually every team like that tournament, which was brilliant.
Yeah. And then finally, probably the most experienced player of the team, Sarah.
The thing with Sarah, I mean, everyone saw it over the course of the week, her consistency, to shoot as consistently as she did at a world championship from I think it was the Thursday when we started the precision shooting, and she threw a lot of ball practicing, and you could tell she had been preparing beforehand. And she got there, and before we threw the first ball of the precision shooting, I could see her hand shaking quite significantly. And I was like, "How are you throwing a ball straight with the nerves you got at the moment?" And I think she managed to find a way to channel those nerves into that extra bit of energy in her shooting. And that wasn't just for the precision shooting, where she showed really good consistency, being a cost short of an automatic space in the quarterfinals. And then during the tournament, she just kept that momentum going. And I would say, bar the last game of the tournament, there wasn't a situation where she would get in the circle and I'd think, is she going to hit? I felt like we could construct our ends tactically because we knew she was going to hit a lot of ball. And when you've got that going on, my God, it makes things easier. I mean, it's same on the pointing side. If you've got a good pacemaker at the beginning, but if you've got someone who's going to continuously keep steady, keep moving ball, stay around on the big shots, it was just, it was a pleasure to watch. And I think that's probably our best tournament I've seen from front to end. You can pick and choose individual games, but she was very, very strong that tournament.
Yeah. So all in all, you just summed up exactly what I felt about it. It was a very unified team with a really great team ethic above all, I think. And the interpersonal relationships between the players, I thought, was really brilliant. It makes such a difference when you've got that, Vince, doesn't it? As a coach,
it does, and they're all so different.
Yeah,
I can't think of many similarities between the 4 of them.
Yeah,
but it kind of just fit. And I mean, we played a lot of cards that week, and it was just very seamless. So it didn't feel like it was forced at any point. And I've heard a lot of stories about the history of England ladies perhaps at the at a World Championship, and a bit of a struggle of personalities, especially with the fourth player often, and I just
I
didn't
was
get a
just about
sense of
to
that, and they made my job easy.
I was just about to say, Vince, obviously just watching from afar, obviously not as close as you and Martin, but it's one of the first tournaments I've witnessed where there hasn't been an obvious fourth. The way England tends to qualify is we qualify with a team of three and we pick a fourth, for want of a better word, from the second place team. And that can always be an awkward thing because you've got to take into skill levels, point it all, but probably more importantly, personality. I think it's the first time in recent years that I've seen a team appear to be gelled, which I think was a really good thing with no obvious. There's always a three and a fourth, and that it was quite obvious that didn't happen in this case.
Yeah, and I think that showed because I think Alex started in the first game, so the fourth of the squad was straight in and played in, arguably the most important role at a World Championship, which is in the middle, certainly on the higher level of standard play. But yeah, that wasn't me trying to necessarily make a point. It was just a feeling before the tournament started. Alex has a little bit more international experience than Ella in the senior game. She's medalled at an adult level as well. And I just felt like it was the right call. And I mean, Alex played really well in the tournament. I've got no complaints at all.
Probably helped as well that Alex and Ella have only just come back from a World Championship, so she's got that natural connection in that team anyway. But yeah, fair play to you. You made the most of it. I think it seemed like a really nice team to work with.
Yeah, and I thanked them a lot during that because they did make my life very easy from a day-to-day getting along, making big decisions and what have you. And they were appreciative as well that it was my first time coaching, but they were also very, very keen to show respect as well. When you're in a squad and a team, it can become us the players and him the coach, or her the coach, or what have you. I didn't get that vibe. I felt like we were in it together from start to finish through the good games and the bad games.
I think that's something that the England squads are getting better at. You take Albertville and Santa Susana recently for the men's. There's been a real team unity, but even with the head of delegation, Martin, and then the coaches, but even more so than that, I've been at both of those championships as a umpire, and I've been included as well. So I think there is that real nice unity that the recent England team seems to have with every part of that delegation, and you're there as a whole, which is great to see.
Okay, we had so much support as well.
That's right. I mean, the people that turned up was great as well. We'll come on to that in a minute. But let's just start with the shooting, because every triples World Championship, whether it be for men or women, always starts off with the shooting. You mentioned it a bit earlier, Vince, about Sarah prepping for that. And I think turning up on the Wednesday and arriving at lunchtime was quite important for us to do that, wasn't it, really, for that prep?
Yeah, it did. And, I think she questioned whether she'd practiced a bit too much the day before.
Yeah.
Sorry, on the day. She threw a lot of ball and her arm was starting to hurt towards the end of the tournament. But
yeah,
she showed that it gave results just short of what where we could have been. Such fine margins at that level.
Yeah. So in that qualification, but you will know only too well, Vince, that was a 33 points, wasn't it, in the qualification stage? And that had actually put her, what was it, 8th. So that was a really strong start, wasn't it? I mean, what's it like as a coach when you're alongside someone shooting? What is it you think you can do to help the player out, or what is it you did to help the player out, probably more directly?
It's a good question. For me, the key is understanding who you're with. I think everyone ticks differently. I've known Sarah for a long, long time. We've been on the piece together. We've played against each other. I've seen what makes her tick. And to be honest, it was striking a right balance, because obviously she was very nervous. And part of it is keeping the energy light and trying to be a little bit fun or silly at the right times. But you also don't want to detract away from her concentration, because Sarah will go from being nervous and needs to relax, and then when she's in the zone, you need to leave her alone. And that's one thing I gathered with Sarah is when once I saw her angry, like, oh, I'm gonna absolutely cane that ball. And once I got that energy, I kind of slowed up a little bit on the communication and just stood with her and was more like, more towards sort of just encouragement and go and nail this again kind of thing. Whereas early on, she hit her first ball and the relief on her face was hilarious. So we laughed about it, and it was like, I could tell you were. I was going to swear there, but yeah, she was worried. As soon as she hit that first ball, you could just see she was going to get into a rhythm, and she didn't even throw that first ball well, but because she threw it straight. And this was her feedback to me. It just kicks you on. You just get that right. I've done my way now, and I can just have fun. And it's that getting in that mentality, but also that balance of concentration.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's clear. I mean, one of the things I noticed a bit lately, well, probably more with the men with the shooting, was that the coach, for me, is being a little bit too interventionist with the players. He was almost like right by their side, sort of punching the air every time a ball's hit, and shouting out and exclaiming, when a ball's being hit. I mean, each to their own, but I've always felt with this that, you need to get the balance right. I think it is right that you need to sometimes crack a joke or two just to break the tension a bit. But like you say, choosing the right point to do that is pretty critical, isn't it, really?
But I don't think I nailed it either. I think there was times where, I think there was even one point where it was when she was doing her 3-ball round in the first set, and I think she scored like 18 or something. She had an exceptional round on that first run, and it was the one she was the most worried about. And I can't remember what I said, but I think I said something sort of very light and sort of jokingly, and she was like, don't say that, and I could tell it was throwing her off a little bit. And luckily that was when she had her best round, so clearly I didn't throw her off too much. But I think she just said, no, don't say anything. That's what she said to me. But yeah, no, it's not easy to do. Not easy to do at all, and that's something I'm gonna keep learning as well. And you have to adapt to everyone. Everyone works differently.
Yeah, because I was just reminding myself again on how that worked on the single ball. There was 3 threes in that first stage.
Yeah, so I'm talking about that 14 in stage 3.
Yeah, that one. I mean, the ball between ball, I've always felt is one of the hardest discipline. I mean, some say it's the ball over ball, but I feel it's that, because it can really kill a shooter where you just get that slight nick on the ball to the side, or you slightly just hit that first, that side ball first before you hit the target ball. And to actually get 2 carrows like that in a row, in that, it's fantastic, isn't it, really? And then hit a 3 after that, and then get a touch as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's world-class numbers by any standards. The funny thing is, when we practiced, that was the one that she was the most concerned about, because a lot of people, they'll land slightly short and push ball out to get consistent 3s at least.
Yeah.
And because Sarah's got such a naturally loopy shot, normally the 4th round and the 2nd round suit her to a T, because it doesn't matter if there's an obstacle there. Her natural throw will beat that. And then when we went live into this, and maybe it was the tension and the nerves that was maybe slightly reducing her natural loop. I don't know, but she was nailing those shots on round 3. Yeah. And funnily enough, round 4, I think, is it 1 she scored? Yeah. A round where she would consistently get 6 minimum.
Yeah.
She had a weaker round. So yeah, just goes to show, no matter how much you prep, you just don't know. Once you're on that stage for the showdown, anything can happen. Well,
it's a hell of a lonely place out there, isn't it, doing precision shooting? I mean, you can see that because even some of the top players, I mean, I remember Rocher in Dijon, how he couldn't get going. It's hard to break a bad cycle, isn't it, in that discipline? You got to keep your self-belief, and if you get a low score in a round, maybe have like a 1 in a round or something like that, or you start badly, it is hard to get back on track, isn't it? Very tough indeed.
I think while we're talking about the shooting, we've got to mention the Thai ladies score, really, haven't we?
Yeah, 52.
Kantaros Chua, yeah, she's something else.
That's something special. That is 52. Yeah. Fair play to her.
Yeah. Okay, and then we went on to the repechage, and in the repechage it was 26, wasn't it? So it ended up 59. So the place was maintained as 8th overall, but it feels to me that the jack just wasn't quite happening for us, wasn't it? I think she got 1, didn't she, in the first, but nothing in the repechage.
Exactly. I mean, I very rarely see Sarah get anything less than 2 koshes. I mean, it's normally 2 or 3 is kind of her running rate from my experience shooting against her, for example, in Chiltern or when watching her at these championships. So Yeah, I know she'll be a little bit gutted about that, and a couple of them were so close, so it wasn't that she was throwing them badly. But
No.
again, it's fine margins, and there's something in this as well. Is with the repechage shooting, half of these teams got to do it not on the main piste. Because where we were seeded, we were put on these show terrains for the shooting. So you've got the cameras in your face, you've got the crowds, you've got the slightly different surface as well. And it's just a complete change in atmosphere. And I think she had just started getting used to the other one, then gets thrown on there. That's a disadvantage, for everyone. And that's why a lot of those weak scores we saw in the first round from the big nations, they were all people that got put on the show terrain. So it shows it's not just in England, globally. Being on that kind of atmosphere change is not easy. To go and then score a solid 26 without a kosh, a kosh later, a kosh more, or 2 koshes more, and we would have been looking at a potential medal opportunity.
Yeah. I think the thing I noticed about that arena, of course, is you can't see it from the photograph, but she's actually shooting towards one of the main walkways into that show pitch. When I was actually watching her, because I was obviously taking photographs looking back that way, I was constantly seeing people walking by. It must have been very difficult. There's so many distractions going on.
Not to mention they were also teaching a guy how to set up the shooting while they were doing it. So there was a scenario where I think we waited 2 minutes to throw a ball.
I'd forgotten about that. Yeah.
And that was getting frustrating for both of us, to be honest. We were both just like, come on. Yeah, it's a lot of little things, a lot of little details.
And then when you look at it, of course, you can see in that full stage there, she got 11 with the ball over ball, which was different. That's the way it works, isn't it, in the precision shooting? You can hit one literally the time you do it before, then hit 11 the next time. And with that ball between ball, that was obviously an amazing 14 and gone down to 3. So it's just the way it is, isn't it? It's just every time you do it, it's so hard to repeat what you've done before when you've achieved a good score, I feel.
Yeah. And again, I'll repeat, 26 without a kosh is solid, very solid. You hit 2 free koshes, that's a big score coming.
Yeah. Okay, that's probably covered off that quite well in the shooting. It does, doesn't it, Vince? It sort of, I always feel that it creates a great atmosphere if you do well in there to start with. It does give a boost to the team. In the past, we've been worried at championships where there's a fear that the player that shoots has a really bad time, and that then creates an atmosphere of negativity. And as much as you say to people, if that happens, look, don't worry about it. Tomorrow's a different tournament altogether. We're moving on to the triples now. It is still quite difficult, isn't it, if that happens? So I felt that set a very positive atmosphere because we did really well in that. How much do you think that then set the scene for what went on from there?
It definitely set the pace. I think that, to be honest, I think even if she hadn't made the repechage, if she had scored a decent score, something to get her arm in, and that's what I wanted her mindset to be. That it's just a warm up. It's a warm up for the championships, and I said that to her probably too many times. But I think if you can go into that, get something out of it, whether it's a great result or just a solid score or getting your arm in. Of course, no one wants to score 1 or 0, and that was always her biggest fear, and it's probably every shooter's biggest fear when they go and do the precision shooting.
It's a lot of pressure.
But once that ball was rolling, her championship was away. As soon as she hit the first ball of the precision shooting on the first round, there was not any concern. Her nerves were still there, but it set the pace for her, and then she just kind of got in a rhythm for the whole tournament.
One thing that I found, Vince, which was quite interesting with this, is I found Sarah's shooting in 2017, where, funnily enough, the total again was 59. The difference being that she hit 35 in the repechage, and you see.
Yeah, I see it.
See the 2 5s, 3 5s overall there on the jack. So that's quite interesting. Yeah, exactly the same total as back then. And again, she literally missed out, I think, by a couple of points to get into the top 8. I think the reality is, when you look at this, we know that you have got to get 30 plus, haven't you, in the qualification and in the repechage to give yourself a chance. And I don't know what you think, Vince, but there's not an awful lot of women really in our country that can do that. Well, there's not many men that can do it, quite frankly. It's a tough target, isn't it? But it's the reality of how you get to a medal, isn't it? At this level, really, quite frankly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah's got it in her. I think that the big thing for her, exactly.
Yeah.
But
She had a much better coach when she was got a medal in Turkey, I think you'll find.
I wonder who that might be, Gareth.
Probably someone who doesn't remember where that it was in Turkey.
I remember the medal though.
Yeah, it is brilliant that she achieved that. And we reference it a lot. Yeah, with regards to Sarah, the big thing for her, that championship, and we spoke about it beforehand and during the tournament. She was not that motivated with ball recently, and she's been struggling to get the enjoyment and the hunger that has always driven her. She's always been a very hungry player and very competitive, and that was one thing she was worried about in the build-up to the tournament, and we spoke briefly about it. And when she got there, I think the atmosphere, the solid start to the precision shooting during that week, she said to me that it's made her enjoy the game again, and she left there feeling a lot more hunger and a lot more enjoyment of ball again. And just that alone has made it a really good championship for Sarah, because we need her in the sport. She's like you said, she's one of the best in terms of shooting in the women's game in the world. She should be in an England women's team, and if she's managed to take that out of it, and it's helped develop some hunger, because look, we've all got stuff going on in our personal lives. If she's found that hunger again, that's awesome, and I'm really happy for her.
I think the impressive thing with Sarah is that it's how long she's been doing it as well. We just joked about, obviously, when I went to the World Championships with her, but I might be getting this wrong, but I'm pretty sure that was 2011, and that wasn't her first World Championships either. So look how long she's been doing it for, and she's consistently up there as one of the best shooters in the world. And to have it over that period of time is incredible. And the women that she was shooting against back in Turkey, they're not about anymore. They are on regional scenes, but for her to still be there over that amount of time just shows the dedication and love that she has got for the sport. And if that has dwindled, like you say, with all the stuff going on, it's great that helped her and you helped her get that back.
She's hungry. She has the hunger again, and she's still young. That's the other thing. Yeah. She's been playing since so young. She's she's around my age as well, and she's got loads of time and loads of ball in her yet, but it's keeping that hunger, not feeling rinse and repeat, and giving her new challenges. And we'll probably touch on it at some point during this conversation, but giving her more exposure to higher pressurized environments and things like that, that's what's going to motivate her to take another level up. Yeah. There's nothing left for her to do in England, and we need to keep that. We need to keep momentum going for her, and not just her, that all the top players in the women's game in England.
Okay, good. Well, let's move on to the actual tournament itself, Vince, and look at the 5-round Swiss, the normal setup. We were talking time game being limited to 1 hour when the men played to an hour and a quarter. What do you think about that yourself?
Found it odd, and to be honest, I had no idea that was a thing. I think it's only in Worlds, right? Is that the case in CEP as well, Gareth?
No, CEP's hour and 15 across the board.
Yeah, for me, it's one of the most bizarre things. I asked one of the umpires, the one who's always on the telly, and he walked past me, and we spoke in Dijon, but we spoke here, and I said, why is it only an hour? And he said, oh, yeah, we can play quicker generally. And I was like, do they? I've never really noticed much of a difference. I've certainly seen some long games in the women's game in England and in France, but I find that a bizarre decision. An hour is not long. That can be 6 ends if teams are really taking their time. It's a bizarre decision and something that should be challenged, in my opinion.
The thing I don't understand about it, Vince, it's over 5 rounds. It's an hour on your day, isn't it? An hour and a bit on your day. But in the gameplay, it's a 25% increase. That's a lot. Mm-hmm. To get 25% more ends, more ball, is huge. Yeah, I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, in an hour game, you lose one bad end, you lose a 4+. You're chasing, and you have to start looking at the clock quicker than you should have to, in my opinion.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on to the Swiss itself, and part of the other thing which was confusing, Vince, wasn't it? Although we're only playing 1 hour, they say we're starting at 8 a.m. in the morning, which, given that our hotel was 30 minutes away, wasn't it? Meaning that 6 o'clock start. It was almost like, okay, well, if you're going to play 1 hour, surely you're going to start a bit later. But that wasn't the case. And so we turned up on the pitch at 8 a.m., well, earlier than that, to obviously do a bit of practice. And we were drawn against Japan, which on the face of it felt like a fairly good draw, usually, from experience of playing Japanese teams. Although I think, personally, I will say, I think the country's got a lot better, actually, over recent cycles in the championships I've seen. But we lost that one 11-8, which was a bit of a downer to start with. I mean, what did you feel about that first game? Bit cold, or...?
I didn't know what to expect against Japan. I watched our England men's team demolish Japan in the men's in Dijon, but the standard was completely different. I mean, we didn't know any of them. We didn't know what to expect. We went in and just tried to play our game, and a slightly slow start on the pointing in the first 3 ends left us chasing a little bit, and that was the only difference. I mean, in terms of percentage of ball played, Japan probably were probably the top 2 nations that we played. I think France and Japan, in terms of effective ball, Japan were brilliant. They played 5-6 ball every single end virtually, and they really made us work. And yeah, it's a shame for them that they didn't keep that momentum up, because they could have really shot us up the BHN table if they kept playing. Some of the nations they lost to afterwards, I was shocked, because if they kept that standard up, they could have competed against anyone. It was impressive. But I mean, going to the England performance again, I don't think we played particularly badly. I think that a little shaky start at the beginning of the first few ends, and then we very quickly found our rhythm, and the game was changing. But again, time and the 1 hour, it could have been a very different story with that extra couple of ends. So yeah, it was a shame. I think our heads could have really gone down there, and it took a little bit of chat within us and just putting things into perspective. And yeah, that was a key point for me. That could have been where it made or break our tournament, and we didn't let it break us. So that was good.
Yeah, and then we swiftly moved on to what I called on the live stream the pétanque Ashes against Australia. Now, that was a very dominant game by England against an Australian team, I thought, who looked quite good.
So Australia were a nation that grew into the tournament. They looked very nervous at the start of the tournament, and at the end of it, they beat Norway in the final game to get into the main. And you know, Norway is one of their shooters was a medalist at this championship, I believe.
Yeah.
But there it was where we made a little change. The piste was slightly different. It was a harder surface and a bit thinner. Made some tweaks in terms of lineup, and again, it was dominance. It was a bit of a no contest, to be honest.
It was, yeah. And then so the third round, who do we get? Of course, always happens to us, doesn't it? We come back to Algeria. How many times have we played Algeria this year, Gareth? It felt like every game you were playing them in Rome.
Space of not even 6 weeks, 4 weeks, we've played them 4 times, didn't we?
In lots of different disciplines as well.
We played them in men's singles, ladies doubles, ladies triples. Absolutely bizarre.
Madness.
Now,
and what were the results before this tournament? Not good, right?
We lost all 3 to them. So yeah, it was a good win.
Yeah. Although they were close, right? They were close. I remember that. Both Alex and Jason very close, right? Yeah. Very, very close.
Yeah, and they were good standard games, especially the one with Jason against the guy who's kind of basically the Philip Kante of Algeria these days. He's like the star player. Yeah, he's a top player, and to go toe-to-toe with him, that was a good game. But going back to this was my favourite game of the tournament. Standard-wise, it wasn't as high as some of the demolishings we did in other games. But in terms of the nitty-gritty, and this is where I think England, on the whole, both genders, I think generally we struggle in these games, those nip and tuck matches, you know, your Denmarks, your Swedens, these nations that just seem to edge us out every time. And it's been happening with Algeria. And this one, there was 2 things. One is that the women's team never gave up. They kept sort of plugging away. They had a couple of bad ends and they didn't get punished too badly for them. And then they took advantage of that afterwards.
These are women that win regularly regional and indeed national level in France, I understand, Vince. So,
yeah, Didi, the middle, is a top player.
Yeah. Hasn't she won the Marseillaise?
So I think the one who won the Marseillaise was the shooter who just lost it during that game. I believe she's the one who's won the Marseillaise in the women's. It was a fantastic result because, again, like I say, we often get edged out in those games, regardless of the standard of the match, whether it was brilliant or poor or what have you. It was such a pleasure to see us turn that tide, basically.
I always feel in these time matches that sometimes we look often like fish out of water because we just don't play a lot of time games in England, and it does require a different mentality, doesn't it? A different way of thinking, a different tactical approach as well. When you get into that, what's happening with, a couple more ends to play and how we're going to play this, and it's you just forget the score. You almost need to forget the score and play your normal game. It's a different approach, isn't it?
Interesting thing with that round is interesting thing with that round is 10 matches didn't get to 13. That's a lot of matches that,
if that's not a scream for needing more time.
Yeah.
No.
Quite bizarre.
What do you think, Vince, about the way we adapt to time games? Is it
in England that people play internationally? When I've watched streams and stuff, I haven't noticed it as much in the women's, but in the men's, we play too quickly often.
Yeah.
I've seen it at numerous championships. It feels very rushed and right. Oh, you play next. Now you play next, and it just seems very regimented. I think in this tournament, in those time games, there was only, I said maybe 3 reminders the whole tournament to just, I'll do a little sign, I wouldn't make it obvious. I'd just say, look, chill. And then I would, when the person was coming towards me to get in the circle, I'd say, it's 10 minutes left, so 2 ends, tops. Then I don't need to say anything about tactics. I don't need to say anything about how to approach it. They can use common sense at that point and they can, lead on their own. But I only did that as a precaution. I didn't do that because I felt they necessarily needed it or they were rushing. It was just more of a reminder.
I think, Vince, what you were saying earlier about the natural sort of unity in the team, I think there was that like synergy between players and a common purpose, and the tactical side of the game and the way you actually paced it or played it or whatever. It just felt very natural in that team. I'm not saying you didn't contribute to that. Of course you did, but it just felt that way. It was just felt very natural the way that team worked together, which you often don't see, which I think was very powerful in terms of how successful we were. Anyway, after that very close game against Algeria, which we were all delighted, and there was a lot of people watching the stream from Algeria. I think, Gareth, you and I are quite well-known commentators in Algeria these days after what was followed the amount of coverage you did in Rome. But we then moved on. Of course, we got that plum match against the French. And unfortunately, a bit like what often happens when we play the French, any level or gender or whatever, we just didn't really get in the game, did we, Vince? Unfortunately.
No, this was an odd one because there was 2 ways we could have gone after this. We could have made changes and we could have really analysed it, but we chose to just kick that one away and just sort of say, right, that happened. It was an early start. You're playing, probably one of the most successful nations in the world.
Yeah,
and. The first end set the pace of that game. France came out nervous and missed 3 shots. And then we had a shot for 3 and it didn't come off. We missed. And we still scored 1, I think, that end. And we got our 1 straight away. But if you come in and you nail that little opportunity they give you, bang, they know they're in a game. The whole vibe and the nerves that the French get even larger. And it could have gone very differently. Unfortunately, it didn't. We tried to reset the next end. And unfortunately, the way the game ended up is we ended up playing into their hands a little bit because they would put an okayish ball and we would put a decent ball and they would hit it. They weren't cowering or anything, but they would hit it and stay around on the piste. And then we'd have a bad kick or something like that. And it just ended up playing into their hands. And we had a slight disagreement on tactics after the game. We, had a brief, let's get it out and say what we had to say. And then we moved on from it. It came down to execution at the end of the day. We weren't at the races. And I think the French felt that. And they took advantage of it and beat us comfortably. That's one that, I do believe that those 4 players could turn around in future. I'm not saying we're going to beat France, 9 times out of 10. but we've got it in us to really have a go at them and go toe to toe with them.
Yeah, I think that's right. I've got to say, Vince, over the years of watching our international teams, whatever gender, whatever level, when we start early in the morning, we never seem to do very well. And I don't know
That
why
showed
that
this
is.
tournament as well, didn't it?
Yeah.
Our 2 losses were the 8 a.m. kickoffs.
Yeah. But, and I look back, because obviously I was closely involved with getting the team to the venue on time, and everybody was up on time. We got there at the time that we wanted to. There was no stress. We had enough time to get ourselves back in to the right frame of mind. We just, on both those games, just looked a bit cold to me. That was the problem there. I'm not quite sure how we coach that in or prepare for that in the future, really. But it is something we need to think about, I think. Anyway, it came on to the final round, and this was showdown time, wasn't it? That game against Estonia. We knew that if we won, we were going to get through. What was going through your mind before that game? Apart from obviously having put the French game to bed, as you've just described, what were you thinking yourself?
Well, this is where I had my major headache on who should start. Because you can't really analyse who played well in the France game. It was over very quickly. So I had 2 choices. One was to revert back to how we finished, the day prior, where we finished very strongly, with the Algeria game. And then the other choice was, do we completely change the dynamic again and try and re-energise and go in guns blazing? And all of that thoughts. This was 5 minutes before the game. I'm still and ahhing on how to approach it, because all 4 ladies were showing brilliant attitude. They were all playing well, generally speaking. And then Alex came over and said, "Ow, my leg." So I said, "Thanks, you made my life easy. Go sit down." And then the other 3 took control, and we knew Estonia were going to try and point us to death. And although they did try to do that, it became a very English game of pétanque in terms of the Estonian team was playing your local team on a Sunday morning on the Worthing thick piece, on the beaches or whatever. It felt very like that. And the Estonian team, from what I've seen, they could play as well, but we didn't give them a chance. We just controlled the game from start to finish. And it was a very, very solid performance. And I think the 2 bad ends we had, our middle, I think, was Ella that game. That was her first game in the middle, I believe. She was nailing points when we were in a little bit of trouble and in looking like we were going to lose an end quite heavily. She'd sit on a ball or sit on the cosh, and that was her best game of the tournament.
Yeah, I've got to say, looking at the players that naturally play middle, Alex and Ella, I just think both of them have got what you're looking for. That they are high quality utility players who can point well and shoot well. And if you've got that, particularly if you can interchange them, if someone suddenly hit a bit of a bad patch, whether tired or whatever, or injured in this case, it's massive. It really is massive. And that's what I felt about the adaptability of those 2 players in this tournament. I just think they were brilliant at doing that throughout for me, really.
Yeah, completely.
Let's just then look at the next thing, which was the actual rankings. So we finished 18th. We had 3 wins. Our BHN was 12. That's a reasonable BHN. We've achieved the number one thing that we're trying to achieve, which is to avoid immediately falling into the Coupe de Nation, which you can still drop into, can't you, if you lose the cadrage? But the first task is to avoid dropping into that and making sure you're in that cadrage to give yourself a chance to get into the top 16. So that successfully achieved, did we not, Vince, in a game against Poland?
We took on Poland, and again, this was one of those, similar to Algeria, one of those nations that if you're not playing well, they can nick one off you. They again, they had a top coach in terms of reputation, former French coach, I believe.
Yeah,
and he was coaching them heavily, but they seemed quite relaxed, and there seemed to be a real hunger within that Polish team. A lot of experience in there as well. They, numerous championships. I think that our women's team just were relentless in that game. It was another demolition job in that tournament, and it wasn't them. Poland did not play badly. Their middle was saving them end after end. Kingo was pointing, didn't have the best game, but from a firepower perspective, they didn't miss a lot of ball. We were just that extra point at the end, or that extra little cosh drag, we were managing to pull off, and it looked like we ran away with it in the end. It was very comfortable.
Yeah. So one thing I brought up a graphic here, Vince, because there was some discussion about this at the time, which is once we'd actually won that game against Poland and we knew we were into the top 16, there was a question everybody scratched head immediately because we weren't sure that the draw was correct. And since that tournament, I've talked to a few experts in competition tournament draws, and it did appear that they got it wrong because effectively what happened was that the numbers should have added up to 17 for that top 16. You see the number at the top there?
Mm-hmm.
So it was 33 in the cadrage. So that's basically where you ended in the Swiss. And then it should add up to 17. So we should, when you apply that principle, you should take the higher placed team's ranking, not your own. In other words, we finished 18. You take, because you've beaten Poland, you take their ranking at 15, and then that adds up to 17 against Belgium, who were the second place team. So although we ended up playing Sweden, that was actually the incorrect draw.
That's fair. To be honest, this is the first I hear of it. But what I will say is, I might have kicked up a fuss if we drew Vietnam 1 or Thailand. But Sweden's about as good a draw as you can get at this stage of a tournament, at a World Championship. You know, yes, we've got a history of beating Belgium. We've beaten those Belgium women several times over the years. But that Swedish team is nowhere near as strong as that Belgian team.
I agree. Yeah.
And we had an opportunity, and unfortunately we didn't take it. And there's many factors to that, and we know the main one to it is exposure to, again, the change of environment. We were moved to the showpiece, and we just didn't adapt. There was probably a hint of fatigue coming in there, but you have to start strong in games like that. And it's even Sweden started very poorly by their standard, and it was a difficult game to watch because we were trying to find a way of getting into our rhythm again, and we just couldn't find it. We tried swaps, we tried substitutions, we tried helping each other more on the piste, we tried changing their throws, and that's not me directing it, that was them talking to each other, and we just couldn't get the rhythm going. And unfortunately that game just slowly slipped away in ugly fashion, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was very slow as well, wasn't it? It was almost like a point or a couple of points every end, but it just kept going against us, and it was difficult to watch that one, Vince, and I'm sure it was tough for you as a coach. And I think you tried everything, to be honest. You tried to change, you tried to mix it around, you tried to change the momentum, the dynamics of the team. That's what you do, isn't it, in a situation like that? Never felt like we were going to get back on track in that game.
Guys, I will just, one more thing to add. I will criticise myself a little bit in that game because I wanted to make the substitution one end before, and I didn't put my foot down enough. Because you have to be careful on how you come across in terms of keeping the morale up within a women's team. I didn't want to come saying, right, you get off, next person on. It needs to come from the team as well. I know we're looking at the bigger picture and we need everyone to be thinking in the same direction, but it's a very highly pressurized environment there. And I hinted that we needed to tweak something. They went off and spoke to each other. And I think that even within themselves, they were thinking that as well. But they decided, because they were at the other end of the show terrain, and it was nearly the end of the end. I wasn't able to go, right, we're making a sub, and we didn't. And in the end, when they came back down, the kosh was thrown. It was too late to make a sub, and we lost another end. So that was one thing that I'll say that maybe I should have been a little bit more assertive on, because I felt like the sub should have made one end sooner. Whether or not it would have made a difference, who knows? But
okay, well let's just tie up this championship then. After that 13-2 defeat for England, Sweden then faced Cambodia and they lost 13-6. As it all played out, Belgium ended up having a really good tournament. Actually, they got through there to medal, and then Thailand, they defeated probably one of their main rivals, Cambodia, and it was that Thailand-Vietnam final. I was quite surprised about the outcome of that. We had a discussion amongst ourselves, people watching, who's the favourite, and everybody went for Thailand, but the Vietnamese played a very good game, I thought, and were worthy winners.
They played a solid game.
Yeah.
They, to be honest, they didn't even have to go into second gear. Thailand just capitulated. It was bizarre. Like, I did not expect it, but the big star that we were talking about, she just could not get going in that game. I think their one inexperienced player out the three in terms of World Championship level didn't have a great game either. I was expecting a top final, honestly, from what I had seen, and it was a bit disappointing not to see them find a gear eventually, because they had chances in that game to get back into it, and they didn't take them.
Yeah. Okay, well, that then ties up the end of that tournament then, and let's just perhaps talk about where we go next, Vince, with our female players. Now, what's your thoughts? We've got coming up next year. We've got the European singles, doubles and mixed in June. So that's in Lorca, Murcia in Spain. And then we have got the women's triples, Europeans triples in Athens, which follows the youth and the espoirs, which is taking place 8th to the 11th of October. So we've got an early tournament where you've got to find, PE's got to find doubles and singles female players. And then we've got the triples back at the similar sort of time of year, actually, October, which I think is a good time for us to be playing, because one of the problems I think we've had in the past is sometimes these tournaments drift into November and December, and our season's finished and there's not a lot going on. So I actually think it does work in our favour, in addition to what Gareth said earlier on about it following on from Rome. Yeah, our season's still relatively fresh, and that works for us. But what's your thoughts? PE is going to take some decisions soon about the process that's going to be followed to find our representatives. I expect that's probably not going to be a lot different to the way we went about it before last year, with a doubles tournament and then a triples, maybe 3 rounds. I don't know. Is that what you're expecting, Vince?
To be honest, I never know what to expect, but in terms of with the women's game, it's the $1 million question, because there's just not enough players. I mean, to be fair, you could argue that with the men's these days, but in the women's, we've got very few teams enter. There's the same 6, 7, 8 players that have a good chance of being up there, and it all comes down to who chooses to play with who. That normally dictates who's going to end up going to the Worlds. And it's a shame, because I would say at the moment, if I count the women that are semi-retired or not on the scene as much, we've probably got 8 to 12 really strong England women players that if they could keep that unit playing and going up a level and get them abroad and play in higher pressurized environments, you could really do something there. And I already think the team that we have now is capable of meddling at a Europeans, but I'm talking on a world level. The only way we're ever going to get there is, and all the women that I've spoken to are completely in agreement with it, is by getting into those, going to Palavas, going to the Blongy National, even just some slightly smaller nations like in Belgium or in Luxembourg or in the Netherlands. There's better standard tournaments there, and I think the only way, and most will know that they'd have to put their hand in their pocket a little bit for that to happen. But now that I've experienced it firsthand, that's what they want to do. But what they don't want to do is have to go and construct that themselves. They want some guidance on, here's a playing program for you. Can you commit to this? And they would. I promise you they would. And that is. I think that's the next thing you have to do. I mean, yeah, you can do some sort of qualifying process while that gets put in place. But I think in the long run, because there's so few women entering, I think we'd have to find a way to decide if it is 8 people or 12 people or whatever it may be. There has to be a fair process to how can you get into that 12? Because if you don't, then you really are starting to become an elitist and just sort of say, right, this is my batch now. No one else is worth my time or day, because that's not fair and it's not right, and it's not necessarily true either. New players come in. You've got Amy Geddes, for example. She's 15, 16. She's going to be up there in the years to come, and she needs a fair route to be able to get into the women's game, a bit like Ella did, a few years prior. So we have to try and figure out a process that works, that keeps everyone happy, and is also giving us some direction for players at all levels to get to that top level if that's what they want to do. But then when you get there, you need that exposure, and that's going to keep the hunger alive. It's going to keep the motivation. It's going to take the play up another level, so that your Sammy Thatchers, your Sarah Huntleys, your Beckys, your Alexes, from all different parts of different clubs and what have you, they'll have a more unified thing because there'll be a structure in place for them to play towards.
What do you think, Gareth?
I think it's a pipe dream, if I'm being honest. I don't think you've got a chance of that happening in this country. I'm not saying you're wrong, Vince. I completely agree with you. But I don't think you've got a hope in hell of that happening. I think there's, you're talking about 8, 12 females, I think that 8 could probably be your max as an elite squad. But then you're going into a squad system, which everyone didn't want previously. I agree that these teams need to go out there and experience higher tournaments, but I don't think that can be done or will be done through Pétanque England. Probably can be done, but I don't think it will be done. I think teams need to be a little bit more selfish, maybe, and do similar to what sort of Jason and Dean and the Ashbys and Kai have done, and go out to these tournaments in Sweden and Netherlands off of their own back. I don't think the whole group of 8 going out there is ever going to happen in England next year. The same thing that's happened as this year. You'll have a weekend tournament for your doubles, and that'll sort out your singles and doubles. You'll have a weekend tournament for your triples, and that'll sort out your triples. And that's all that will happen. And I'm not saying it's right, but that is what will happen.
Yeah, and you're probably right. But what I would say is another thing is if it does go to another SSC or whatever we're going to call it next year, we need to make it clear that teams can enter as a 4.
Well, absolutely. I think it was this year, to be honest, but there's not enough. The problem with the females game is that if you have teams of 4, which I do agree is the way forward, is that you haven't. I think we had 5 teams, did we, for entry for the women's this year? And one of them was I think it was 5, and one of them was it might have been 6, and one of them was a junior team. And there's nothing wrong. I'm all for the juniors getting exposure to the adult game, so that's great. But you take one player out of your teams to whack to a 4th, you could have 4 teams playing, Vince. And I completely agree with you. All tournaments should be 4 players because you've got to get used to playing as a 4 and how you work manage as a 4. But I just don't think there's enough players for that at the moment. It also stops a lottery of who comes second. We're quite lucky that Alex was quite a natural fit into that. I think it should be allowed for them to enter as 4. I don't think it should be compulsory. But I do think, sadly, your plans are probably for in 2-3 years' time, not for in a year's time.
Yeah, sorry, Vince, let me just come in here a second. I just want to sign back a bit to a way that we used to do things. It wasn't that long ago that we did used to take delegations or squads or groups away based on national rankings to tournaments where people could play at a very high level. And the one thing I think which has been lost a bit over recent years is that if you don't win, you get nothing. And I don't think
I completely agree with you, Martin, but
very
the players hated it.
Yeah. Well, I know that, but what they didn't hate was going away and being given an opportunity. The first time Becky, for example, played at international level was when she went to Marseille. Ella was in Marseille when she was about 12 or 13. And the first time that we all realised that she was a great prospect was that she was beating senior women from places like Luxembourg, and I remember taking on Nancy Balzan's sister and taking her to about 11 or something like that. And when we went to Holland, Vince, you were there when we went to Holland the other year as well as a group. I think there does need to be a bit of planning, is what I'm saying. I'm not saying we're going to go into a squad system, but there's got to be some international exposure. There's got to be some planning done. Otherwise, I just don't think we're going to.
I completely agree with you, Martin, but I think at the moment, and I'm not saying this is right, I'm really not, 'cause I completely agree with what Vince said, but I think at the moment, I think that international experience is on the players. And I think if they want to be going to these international tournaments, there's people like yourself, even Vince with his connections in France. I'd help as much as I can. There is people that will help them achieve that. But I think it needs to be on the players to do rather than Pétanque England. I don't think Pétanque England will fund multiple trips abroad because the problem is they go and invest X amount of players, in say one team, because we're so year by year, and sometimes not even a year, 3 months, 3 months. I don't think they'll invest in that long-term plan. I'm not saying they shouldn't, because I do think they should, but I don't. We've seen it with the juniors. Look at all the trips that they've had this year. and we spoke earlier about how that investing is going to bear fruit 2 or 3 years' time. You can't start something now and expect it to be bear fruit straight away. It's not going to happen.
So for me, I think what we need to do is, first of all, see if anyone can create a playing calendar. And I'm talking about having a look at a given year, so Palavas in June and, the Marseillaise in July, whatever it is. I'm just saying, for example. But I'd say 4 tournaments between May and August or September, depending on how the year is, and bringing those to the players. Now, how we choose which players we give that to, do you do it based on who's qualified together the prior year, whatever, that we need to figure out. But if you can come and show them and say, look, this is what we want to offer you guys to do, this is what it's going to cost you to do all 4. You can have a private conversation with PE saying, look, this is what we want to do to elevate this, and can you contribute anything here?
I think what would work with that, Vince, is, we've just stopped giving away championship shirts, and we're giving away, I found out this year that we're giving a free entry to next year's national competitions. Why aren't we saying to people, you win the triples, the next calendar event or whatever is the Marseillaise, whatever, we will pay 50% of your entry fee into that. Why don't they do something like that?
Yeah, and I'm going to become public enemy number 1 with some people for saying this, but there's 2 things here. One is the PE bank is not hurting. Let's just add that for starters. The finances are not bad and pretty unused from what I've seen. But point number 2 for me is why we want to invest in juniors and younger players and stuff, but they have absolutely no more right than the adults. A lot of them have got parents that are there, and they can put their money in their pockets just as much as any other adult player. But I also feel that currently in the country, the one category, men's, women's, juniors, espoirs, adults, where we've got a chance of getting results, and it's proved in previous medals, is in the women's game. And I feel like these hustles at the interregionals to give the juniors funds, I believe that it should be equal as well for at least the women's currently, because of recent results. The whole country wants to see England do well, and they also want to see the young development of players. Like I said, parents might hate me for this, but I genuinely feel the adult game deserves a bit of a can you help us out kind of vibe as well, because they are willing to put their hand in their pocket to some degree.
Yeah, I'd agree. I disagree that the women have got more chance than men, but that's a whole different subject. The men have performed consistently over the last few
I'm basing it on results, right? On the results that have happened in the last 10 years. That's what
I think one of the problems we've got, the top level of the sport, is that we don't take a holistic approach to things. We don't look at it in the round and say, what resources have we got, and what is an equitable and correct distribution of those resources? And it's not just financial resources, it's also human resources, the people that support those players to do whatever they've got to do. We did in the past attempt to do that. I myself, when I was on the board, I did try to advocate a much more holistic, comprehensive look at the picture. Unfortunately, what does tend to happen is in the past, what I would call a bit of a silo mentality. We're all in our different each gender groups. I understand why it happens. People want to focus on supporting those players in those groups, but we've got to try and learn to be a little bit more thinking outside the box on this.
Yeah, like an overall playing pot, right? Like a playing pot and you look at that year, and, realistically, how much are PE going to spend on going to the next World Championship?
Malaysia.
When you've got, Malaysia, there you go, somewhere that's on the do not travel list, just to add. Are we going to focus our funds on funding that? And this is not a men's versus women. Doesn't matter which category. When you're getting, that money, is that money well spent to go to Malaysia, or is it money well spent taking juniors, inexperienced juniors, I'm going to add, to the other side of the world, when you've got you can use a quarter of that money to support a team to go to France, which is an hour away.
I'd agree
it's just
with that.
Where I agree with the holistic thing that Martin's saying.
I mean, the thing is with that Malaysia thing, what you've got to bear in mind, Vince, is the Malaysian Federation, I was there when they talked about it at the FIPJP Congress, that they are picking up the accommodation costs, right? And they're picking up the food costs, they're picking up the transport costs. So the cost of that is about travelling. Now, when you go on a long haul trip, it's a £500 contribution from the players, right? Now, it's still probably going to be £700-800 return flight to Kuala Lumpur. If you book it early enough, you're probably going to be okay, but that depends on when you find out who the team is. It isn't as expensive as you might first think, but you are right. It needs to be looked at carefully. Someone needs to put it on a spreadsheet, right, and just go through it. Look at it. What's been invested here? What's been invested in the juniors? What's been invested in the espoirs as well? Because we were talking about Amy earlier, about where she goes next. I still believe that some of our best players have progressed because they went through the espoirs route first. They went from the juniors to the espoirs, then they went on to the seniors, right?
Yeah, we saw that with Sophie Rowley and Ella and Jane Geddes, where they medalled.
Yeah, we're not saying they can't compete at the senior level. They're entitled to. They're 18 years old. They can enter, do what they want. But I still feel that route is a good one, and that needs to be thought about. Anyway, I think we've probably covered a lot of ground this evening. Thanks very much for your time, gentlemen. Vince, it was a pleasure to have you on the show, and Gareth, as usual, thanks very much for your input.